Hi, friends. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to the gathering. Thanks so much for joining me. I came across a wonderful Indian fable that I think is incredibly helpful for where you and I might be at this stage of humanity. It's a story about and I found it in an old book, Joseph Campbell Companion. And it's just magnificent. And it talks about the fact that this lioness is pregnant and she's starving. And out of that need to feed, she comes upon a herd of goats. And in her overzealousness to sort of attack these goats, she gives birth unexpectedly and dies within the process. And of course, the goats had fled, but when they came back, they find this baby lion and this dead mother. And so, having an empathetic heart, they take this little lion and they start to raise it as one of its own. So it modifies and learns the ways of goat life, all the way down to instead of roaring, it has what they call in goat language a little bleat, "Bah." So that's what it does, and it stays that way in that tribal experience all the way into adolescence, until one day a lion comes and discovers this herd of goats and decides to attack. In the attack, all of the goats flee, but this innate, inherent thing within the baby lion, who is now an adolescent, doesn't flee. For some reason, it just sort of stays there. And so the adult lion finds it and he's curious. He's like, "You have not been raised by goats, have you?" And all that he can do is go, "Meh." And the adult lion is horrified. He is horrified that this has been the outcome of this particular young lion. And so, um, like the metaphor of a guru finding the initiate, he takes it and he brings it back to a lion's den and slowly but surely begins to deconstruct this sort of brainwashing or modification within the lion. One of the things he does is he sort of force feeds meat into him, which makes him gag. And I love that part of the story where it talks about you and I gag as well when we are forced a sort of the meatiness of truth because it's difficult for us to swallow or absorb something when we have been too involved in a movie or the illusion or the game of life. But once he begins to get a little bit of that ingested into his bloodstream, suddenly, through this natural osmosis, he begins to rediscover or reawaken to his true self. And the adult lion finally takes him to the reflection in a pond and he makes him look and he says, "Look, see here. This is what you are. You are me. You are me. And it is time to claim that. It is time to set aside anything other than your true nature." And so the discussion around such a fable is the understanding that we have all been raised as goats when we are lions. And who wakes up from that? Who has the interference or the interruption from um, some experience of truth, some teacher, something that reawakens that, and the struggles that we have with moving away from or dropping our attachments to goat behavior and becoming more and more and more the embodiment of our lion nature. And it's a beautiful illustration, and I think it's one that you can sit with and ponder for yourself. And I look at you directly and I say, what you are is a lion. What you are is this channel, this vessel, this beingness that is immeasurable and is an attribute or an instrument of that which is boundless, infinite intelligence, whatever words that you want to use to describe that. And yet we navigate in this plane of existence, this human form, which is all goat derived. Goat derived. So you and I walk among the goats, and we have lapsed into goat behavior many, many, many times. And but it's that taste. It's like having that meat shoved in our mouths, getting that into our bloodstream, getting some semblance of truth, where all of a sudden you realized, wait a minute, I have options. Wait a minute, the the religion or the culture that I was born into does not necessarily hold the essential nature of who I am. And so many of us have gone on these sort of rites of passages, on these quests in order to remove or disengage from so much that is not our essential nature. And much of that takes place mentally. In fact, I would say the majority of that takes place within the realm of consciousness, within the realm of mind. And so it's easy to talk about the the activity of spiritual practice. It's easy to offer suggestions and tools and things, but if we approach these practices and tools conceptually, again with the process of the mind that still struggles with being a goat, then we can only reach a certain level of awareness that hasn't broken free from intellectualizing it. It really is in being in the arena with all of the goats, not running away from it, not condemning it, understanding it, understanding it, understanding actually the sort of sorrowful nature of that level of forgetfulness, the sorrowful nature of dualism, the us and the them, the sorrowful nature of having been separated from our divine origin. And even though people don't talk in that way or language their feelings in that way, you can begin to sort of see that the heaviness that is experienced by humanity is at its core, at its origin, nothing more than the separation of their lion nature, their true self. The uncovering and the invitation and embodiment of the true self is enlightenment. It is liberation. It is freedom. And I ask you the question, do you think or do you feel that that is possible for you even in this massive arena, this movie, this game, this illusion, where we have been brainwashed in a sort of different way? Do you believe that it's possible to wake up from that? And if so, how does one do that? And then how does one practice and become sustainably awakened instead of falling back and forgetting and then having little moments of clarity and falling back? So you start to see that this is sort of the universal shared experience that we all have, because we're all one. We're all this one massive sleep state that is slowly waking up. And the beautiful part is that when one person wakes up, and there are many people who have awakened, there are many, many sages and gurus and wisdom teachers and sadhus and holy people and just exquisite, exquisite change agents within the field of consciousness that have awakened. And the thing is that when one does, that tipping point of more begins to happen. And That's why we're here. That's why we're here. We're here sort of to walk in this field of sorrow. So the human experience is like a field of sorrow. And to try to fix the sorrow is to miss the point. It's trying to engage with the level of the dysfunction at the level of the dysfunction. But it's beginning to understand that the sorrow or the duality, the yin yang will always exist. And so it isn't about eradicating or removing that which is sorrowful. It is learning how to be in the field of sorrow and activate the inner joy and activate that liberation, activate that level of reawakening to the true nature, even in the apparent absence of it. And so wisdom tells us then that as we continue to practice this, that it's not that we're denying the sorrow of others. It now makes us more effective to uplift those who are in their sorrow to become less identified with it. Do you see how this goes? And so there are many, many people, there are many situations, there are many things that are crossing your field of experience that are like the adult lion. There are messages, there are collectives, communities, there are pathways that are like that for you, that are wanting to shake you awake from the sleepingness of your goat, your goat seduction, if you will, your goat identity illusion. And all that one can do is first hear the fable and sit with the fable and begin to have a seed of willingness that, yes, perhaps this fable is also applicable to me. Being raised by goats and walking around goats, again, is not about making the goat wrong. You could say that that is a part of the movie. Everyone does that. Everyone goes through that. And so that experience is an essential ingredient to the pathway of liberation. It's sort of the friction that is necessary. It's like the water and putting the oar in the water as you're rowing. You actually need the friction of the water in order to be able to move forward. There's an old wise story that says if you removed the canoe or the boat out of the water and you're just rowing in air, you don't go anywhere. So that friction, that forgetfulness, that field of goatness is necessary in order to navigate or our way back into our true nature. So we don't curse the friction. We don't curse the sleeping state, and we don't curse those who walk around in it. We see it for what it is. And we recognize that that too is an element of returning or inviting in more of our true nature. So I guess my message for you as this week unfolds is to pay attention to the things that have represented that adult lion that has wanted to shake you from your sleeping state. And rather than turn away from it or medicate yourself from it because it just feels too overwhelming, all one has to do is to begin to lean into it, to lean into it, to perhaps let go of the struggle, perhaps let go of the fear. Because if all that you know is being a goat, then you're right. We become sedentary, we become inert in that. And we will just have to keep doing this process and this dance all over again. So here is to all of the visible signs and wonders, the voices, the communications, the insights, the synchronicities that represent that lion for you. And I would like you to play around with perhaps an affirmation or a mantra, something that you could say this week that'll keep bringing you back to this message, this fable. And that is, I see and welcome my lion teacher. I see and welcome my lion teacher. So I hope that you will allow yourself to have fun with that and to be lighthearted in that approach and to see that that is the inevitability of you and I returning home to self. Till next time, blessings.